Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Detroit Institute of Art's Thursdays at the Museum program. I'm Amanda Harrison, a Community Engagement Manager with the DIA. Today, we'll view a selection of work exploring the behaviors around love during To Die Upon a Kiss, Part 2. During the program, our Manager of Volunteer Services, Christine Mark, will be taking your questions. To ask a question, you can leave a comment on this Facebook post or leave a public comment on our YouTube page. Be sure to log into your YouTube account using your Gmail. Today's hosts include docents Deb Coombs, Kathleen McBroom, and Tana Jenkins. Welcome, ladies. How are you?
Hello. How are you?
Hi, everyone.
All right. Thank you, and let's get us started.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are absolutely delighted to be with you today. And as Amanda just told you, today we're going to be spending some time looking at love and its many manifestations. Now, it's really important that you pay extra special close attention because today we're going to have a trivia question, and we have this fabulous gift for our winners. This is a table sculpture of the iconic Love sculpture that was created by Robert Indiana. And as I said, at the very end, I'll give you a trivia question, and the first one to respond gets to take this and put it into their home. So, great. So let's go back to our presentation today. I mean, throughout history, artists from all cultures, across time, have tried to capture all of those fleeting emotions and the things that people do, the conflict, the misunderstandings, the various stages of love. And I mean, they've tried to capture these, whether it's grand, sweeping, romantic love or just kind of, soft love, kind of like a gentle murmur. And we know from science that when we're in love, or we think we're in love, our brain releases this hormone called dopamine. And dopamine is a natural stimulant, and it makes us do all sorts of things, the things we do for love. And so today, as I said, we're going to be sharing some of the pieces from our collection that evoke various types of love. There is, of course, the great, dramatic, passionate, sweeping, romantic love. But there's also family love and love of children. There's love of country. There's deep love between friends, and then there's just kind of general love for humanity. So while we share these pieces today, let's try to keep a couple things in mind, okay? So remember, first of all, love can be, any kind of manifestation you can think of. Something else, remember, love isn't always perfect. It isn't always pretty. And the people who fall in love, they don't have to be perfect or beautiful. I mean, love can come to all of us. And then just third, while, you listen today, just think about this complex emotion of love. How do we know it? How do we show it? And how do we recognize it? So on with the show. First off, my colleague Tana is going to take us back a couple thousand years and show us that some elements of love are both universal and eternal. So Tana, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Fantastic intro. The love we're looking at here, and I apologize in advance, the garbage truck just came by, so you might hear some background noise. But the love we're looking at here is kind of the love of life. And of course, love of life is enhanced by respect for death. Abraham Maslow said the confrontation with death and the reprieve from it makes everything look so precious, so sacred, so beautiful, that I feel more strongly than ever the impulse to love it, to embrace it, to let myself be overwhelmed by it. Death and its ever-present possibility makes love, passionate love, more possible. And so again, what we're looking at here is a Nayarit sculpture, two sculptures from Western Mexico. And this small sculpture is called a funerary sculpture. But before I even get into that, I just want a little bit about the Western Mexico. Mexico built the largest cities of the ancient Americas. They independently invented writing, created calendars, mapped the stars, and although the people were different across regions, they shared a common belief, and that was that life and death alternate with one another in constant rotation, a continuous cycle like night and day or the changing seasons. And these sculptures are emblematic of those beliefs. The sculptural figures were made to mark the transition between life and the afterlife. And the piece has no label in the gallery. We don't know the artist, but we do know that it was created between 100 BCE and 400 BCE. It's ceramic. And I mentioned the term before, funerary objects. Funerary objects are artifacts or objects that, as part of a death rite or ceremony of a culture, are believed to have been placed with the individual human remains either at the time of death or later. And many cultures throughout history have believed in the importance of funerary objects. In Chinese culture, they were sometimes called spirit objects or vessels for ghosts. They included everything from daily utensils, musical instruments, weapons, armor, and more items belonging to the deceased, like a cap or a bamboo mat. The ancient Egyptians did this because they believed that the funerary objects were necessary to ensure immortality after death. And the Egyptians used things like mummy masks, necklaces, small sculptures. So the Nayarit couple that we're looking at today is part of the West Mexico's shaft tomb tradition. And like the name suggests, the tombs were typically a vertical shaft dug 3 to 20 meters beneath the ground, often with a building over top. And the tombs would contain the remains of entire families. And it's suspected that because of the labor and resources involved in making the shafts, they were probably most commonly used by the society's elites. So these in particular are about the pleasures in the next life. And various details in the well-appointed sculptures represent the ideal life. You've got ornaments decorating the ears and the nose. See, you've got little bones in the nose, a nose ring, which is, those are emblematic of wealth. And someone the other day pointed out that it was interesting to them that these ancient traditions are still being mirrored by people today. You see all sorts of folks with face piercings, and we're not sure if those are tattoos or body paintings, but both you'll see today. And you have a woman holding a body. Yep. You have a woman holding a baby. That signals the desire for healthy children. And fertility imagery often appears in the mortuary offerings of Mesoamerican people. And more than likely, that's related to the concepts of death and the afterlife. You've got a man playing a musical instrument, and that suggests festivals to enjoy. And of course, going back to the original idea of love, the reason these small sculptures were often placed in the tombs with the deceased family was because of love. It was an act of love itself. It was in furtherance of the hope, or to express the hope, that in the next life, the people would experience all the pleasures and opportunities that were available in this one, and then some. So, any questions? Sounds like there's no questions, so I will pass the mic. Is it Kathleen? Are you next?
No, I'm next, Donna, and I love those little sculptures. But here now are some full-size sculptures, full-size, just like us. This is our Mpando bride and groom, and they hail from the Republic of South Africa. They're dressed in traditional wedding ensembles of the Xhosa culture, and their garments symbolize the very essence of love, multi-layered love, love for one another, love for their families, and love for their ancestors. In most places around the world, marriage is recognized as a pivotal milestone in life. We recognize it that way too. And many times, just like in our culture, it's celebrated with special clothes and treasured objects. In much of Africa, marriage transcends the union of two individuals and becomes a bond between two families. And so, what the couple might wear on their wedding day can have specific meaning to both of their families. Not only can these garments highlight family history, but they also can serve in communicating the values of a couple. The garments can convey many things like wealth or wish for health and spiritual blessings. Each wedding ensemble is different because each one of these garments is made by hand. The garments of the process of creating this wedding attire for the Empando bride and groom is a real labor of love. When a couple plans to marry, the women from each family gather together to make the wedding gowns. They bring their finest fabrics and combine them so the garments match one another, and you can see that's true here. They also make a crown and a headdress for the bride and groom. They might incorporate found materials in the ensembles. Like here, they have cans that hold special medicines or herbs. When the clothing is finished, the women then begin the most arduous task of all. They decorate those clothing with beads. Now take a look at this couple. Look at all the beads on them. They're from a royal wedding. They're wearing thousands of seed beads that come in trade from Europe. The beads are valued family possessions that are sometimes passed down between the mother and the child. They reflect light, and they're also believed to transmit spiritual energy. So not only do they communicate the wearer's wealth, position, and social status, but they also represent the presence of the ancestors. The number and the weight of beads is equivalent to the love and the respect for the ancestors, who also join together in this union of families. Sometimes the bride and groom are given special objects to help them in their days ahead. As we said before, this bride and groom has vials of medicine around them, cans of medicine. What are the medicines? They're usually a combination of herbs to help heal them if they have medical problems, to alleviate sickness, or to ensure fertility. The staff that groom carries might be seen as a symbol that represents the help and guidance that the couple will need on their journey through life together. There are very few sculptures that still exist from this area, and ours is from the 1950s. However, the tradition continues to this day. Kimmy, could you show us the next slide, please? Take a look at this couple. They're a recent couple, married in the Xhosa culture, and who celebrated their wedding in South Africa. Now take a look at them. Their ensembles are the same color, predominantly white. They have these diamond decorations on them, on both of them. And look at their collars, blue and beautiful. And they have little beads all around their collars. The bride has a beaded headdress. She has little markings on her face. And take a look at the staff that the groom is holding. Look at all the beads on that staff. So they really are bringing that tradition to this time in history. Now, can we go back? Thanks. Our Empando bride and groom sculptures have 432 components, and only 105 are on view. So you can imagine the weight of these ensembles when they got married. But because fabrics are fragile and sensitive to light, the DIA protects the original garments by keeping them in storage. These textiles shown here are man-made reproductions that allow these ensembles to remain on view, and we're lucky that they do. So the next time you visit the DIA, go down to the first floor to the African galleries, see this wonderful couple in person. Christine, are there any questions?
Hi. Yes, there are a few, well, there's actually a few comments. One is that this is just such a beautiful ensemble. The couple was wearing such, magnificently beautiful clothing. And the other comment was, in general, about the talk, that love means so many different things to so many different people, and that it can be interpreted in so many ways, even sometimes when you feel love, it's counterintuitive, but you still feel it.
Right.
So that was just a comment. That's all we have right now.
Okay, thanks. Well, Kathleen, let's go to you, and we're going to see a piece from Korea.
That's true. Thanks, Deb. That was great. So Tana started us off with a Nairi couple from Mexico, and Deb just introduced us to a bride and groom from the Xhosa culture in Africa. So today we're going to take a quick look at this wedding box, or its official name, Box with Design of Auspicious Symbols. And this dates back to the 1700s. And I wish we could look at the whole box. This is the only view of it we have right now. And if you could get in and see it in the museum, you'd be able to appreciate the designs. Now, it's not that big. It's only like about 22 inches long, and then it's only like 10 inches high and 12 inches deep. So it's not that big. But having said that, the entire box is just covered, as you can see, in intricate colors and designs everywhere. Going along the top, you can see there's a lot of flowers. There are birds on the side, the top, everything. If we could see the back, it's completely covered. The kinds of things we see is we would see a lot of pairs of animals, 2 deer, 2 fish, 2 birds. In the Korean culture, whenever you saw 2 flowers, 2 butterflies, 2 anything together, that symbolized a man and a woman, and it symbolized a happy marriage. On the box, I don't think we can see it. It's not on the front. I think on the back there is this turtle or this tortoise with this exceptionally long neck that just kind of curves around the box. The tortoise is a sign of longevity. And we're not just talking about like a long life, and well, we are, of course, we're talking about a long, happy life for the bride and groom. But when we talk about longevity, we're talking about children and grandchildren and generations and generations. And then also on this box, it's up on the top, kind of kitty corner from each other, we have a dragon and we have a phoenix. Now, the dragon is actually a symbol, the whole idea that came from China. And it came from China to Japan, and eventually it got to Korea. And originally, the dragon had been the sign of the emperor. So when it's found on this box, the dragon is, of course, representing the masculine side of things. The phoenix is a mythological bird, and it appears in many, many cultures. And the story of the phoenix is that it never dies. Well, it does die. It sheds all of its feathers, and it kind of collapses, and then from the ashes, the phoenix is reborn again. So it's eternal life. It's rebirth. It's starting over again. So, of course, the phoenix is the sign of the woman. And when I'm touring this down at the museum with very young visitors, I like to remind them of the phoenix that is a regular character in the Harry Potter books. He belongs to Professor Albus Dumbledore, and his name is Fawkes. And he has a really bad habit of self-incinerating at the worst possible moments. But anyways, I digress. Now, this box, or a box like this, would only have been found in the home of a very, very wealthy, very elite family. And it would have been treasured. It would have been passed down, usually from mother to daughter, usually when the daughter got married. And women might keep their jewels in here. They might keep their sewing. They might keep their just about anything. But it would be very small, and it would be kept in the woman's bedchamber. And the reason it was so expensive and elite is because this is made. It's a very unique craft known only in Korea. And in Korea, they have the big oxen. They have the big tusks, kind of like our American buffalo, only their tusks are much bigger. And they would take the tusks and they would melt them or steam them until they kind of became kind of a gooey substance. Then they would spread it out very, very thin. And when it dried, they would have these super thin sheets. They would cut them into the squares and the rectangulars that we see on the box. And they would paint these intricate designs. But then the thing that's interesting is they would turn it around and they would attach the painted side to the wooden box. So the colors that we see, we're seeing through the translucent tusk. We're seeing colors that are muted and are given this kind of special overall sheen. And because the colors are facing inward, the colors will never fade and they'll never go away. And one last thing I like to ask visitors, if they had such a treasure box, what kind of things would they keep in there? So, Christine, do we have any questions?
No, we have a few more comments about the power of love, but no questions specific to our lovely box.
Okay.
Thank you for your reminder of the phoenix and in Harry Potter. I think all of us have a fond memory of that one.
Indeed. Indeed.
Oh, wait, I may have gotten a comment. Hold on. Don't go away. Okay. When the box is passed down to another family member through the generations, do we know if it's passed down empty or if it's passed down with heirlooms, possessions, or perhaps, like dowry type things? Do we have the answer to that?
I don't think we have an answer to that. We can imagine, but yeah, it would have been just as, knowing that it came from your great grandmother. Who knows what treasures you might find in there. So.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, we've kind of been wandering all over the world. Donna, why don't you take us back to America for a little bit?
Sounds good. I love that talk. I love hearing the story about the Phoenix. And that was a fantastic question that really set your imagination rolling. Is the box empty for you to fill with your own marital memories, or are you inheriting some of the stuff from whoever had it before you? So, Good question. What we're looking at now are two sculptures by Mary Edmonia Lewis. On the left, we have Hiawatha, and on the right, we have Minnehaha. These figures represent characters from a Henry Wadsworth Longfellow poem that was popular in 1855. And the poem was called Song of Hiawatha. And that's particularly neat for people from Michigan because the poem was inspired by the stories of Henry Schoolcraft, a Michigander who worked in northern Michigan. And the poem was set at Lake Superior's Pictured Rocks, which are these incredible rock formations in northern Michigan for those who are not in Michigan and for those who are not familiar. Definitely worth a trip. The characters are featured today in today's show because they symbolize the power of love and its ability to bring unity. In the poem, the portion about Hiawatha and Minnehaha talks about unity. Hiawatha was Ojibwa and Minnehaha was from the Dakota Nation. And these two First Nations had been warring for generations and generations. And the love between Hiawatha and Minnehaha brought peace between the two nations. So the sculpture of Hiawatha is shown in native dress. You can see the vest and the headdress, and his lover, Minnehaha, is depicted wearing European-style dress and a string of pearls. A couple of things about... Sorry?
I was just showing off my pearls.
They say Edmonia deliberately put Minnehaha in the pearls as a nod to her own mixed heritage. Her mother was Native American and her father was, they're not sure, some kind of Black, Caribbean American, maybe kind of Haitian, they're not exactly sure. But the contrasting dress is also indicative of the difference between the two First Nations. So the style of these sculptures is a neoclassical style, and it's based on ancient Roman portraits. And this was a very popular style with the tourists. Edmonia was quite a marketer. She was creating to market. She knew that this style looked older and more distinguished, and then the size are very portable. So lots of tourists would purchase these busts on their European trips and put them in their luggage and bring them back for their travels. At the time of their creation, it was very unusual for a female sculptor to work in the marble medium. And that's because it was considered too difficult for women to handle. You've got, especially in 1868, you've got pretty rudimentary tools that you're using. And Edmonia herself was a very petite woman. She was between 4 feet and 5 feet tall, really petite. So you've got this small woman manipulating and maneuvering heavy rock all by herself. A lot of these other sculptors had teams, assistants to polish the rock and to help with the chiseling, but Edmonia was doing it all on her own, and that fascinated people. another thing that fascinated people was, of course, her mixed heritage and her choice of using the classical style. But for Edmonio, she associated the classical style with the life of the mind and with noble feelings and universal ideas, which was a predominant attitude at the time. And she was also asserting her own legitimacy to a white audience by selecting the European style. These poems, I should add, are meant to be seen more as portraits and less as narratives from the actual poem, and they have a very austere feeling. The white marble's absence of color gives a sense of coolness and distance of the figures, and the details are incredibly realistic. Edmonia Lewis eventually moved to Rome, which has a long marble sculpting tradition. There's a picture of Edmonia. She moved there for a couple of reasons. She was fleeing racism in America, and it was easier for her to study and work in Rome. There was also a really supportive, embracing colony of women artists there, who she ended up joining them. But she had quite an intrepid spirit. Her Ojibwa family called her Wildfire, and she was raised mainly by them. She and her brother were orphaned young. And so, yeah, that's what we have on Hiawatha and Minnehaha, the power of love to bring unity. Christine, do we have any questions?
The question was in support of the narrative that you just talked about, and wasn't the love between them a way to bring the two nations together, or did it bring the two nations together? Was it did it create an act of peace? That's the kind of question. And I know Longfellow did talk about that in this very, very long poem. So,
as I understand it, yes. I am not an expert, but that is my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And so, seeing no further questions, Deb?
Thanks so much, Carne, for that wonderful presentation of those small sculptures by that tiny woman. I'm so impressed by those always. And those are in American galleries, as Tana said. And if you walk through the American galleries, a few rooms down, you will see this portrait. It's called the Lamplight Portrait, James Peale, and it was painted by his brother, Charles Peale, in 1822. Charles Willson Peale was the leading portrait painter in America for many, many years. He taught painting to several generations of his family, and today they are collectively known as the first family of American artists. At 81, he was 81 when he painted this portrait of his brother, James, who was at this time 73 years old. James Peale was a simple, manly, retiring character. He had been trained in his poverty-stricken youth as a saddler. In 1769, he learned the art of painting from his brother Charles. Charles liked painting full-size portraits and paintings, but no, James decided he wanted to specialize in miniature paintings. On the outbreak of the Revolution, James enlisted in a Maryland regiment and rose as captain in one of the most effective units of Washington's army. But after 3 years of service, he resigned his post and he returned to a distinguished career as an artist. In 1822, Charles painted this portrait of his brother. He depicted him as he was. Take a look at him again. He's 73 years old here. He's got wrinkles, he's got warts, but he's looking very, very, elegant in a way. He's got his clothes on that an elegant man of his stature would wear. And take a look at what he's doing. He's sitting in a room that is shrouded by light. He's quietly sitting at that table, and by the light of that lamp, he's gazing at a miniature portrait of a young woman. James is dressed in traditional conservative clothes, but notice the metal on the left lapel of his coat. Now, the argon lamp that illuminates his face, torso, and the items on the table represent an advance in technology and innovation. This lamp burned brighter than candles with no exposed flame. Here, it symbolizes enlightenment of the new American citizen. Now, Charles wanted to include into his painting the three things that make a great American citizen: educating yourself, educating your children, and serving your country. So here we see James, a skilled artist and an educated citizen. Kathleen, do you see what he's doing right there?
Well, you said he's looking at a portrait, and I'm trying to see up close. It looks like it might be a young girl or a woman.
Yes, you're right. It is a young girl. It's his grandniece, Roselba. And here's a small palette and a brush on the table nearby. And here is that portrait of Roselba. His daughter, Anna Claypool Peel, painted this tiny portrait. In early America, women's access to education was limited. And so James taught his daughter, Anna, how to paint miniatures. Notice James's face as he studies this tiny portrait. We saw that. He's looking at it with loving pride and affection. So now James was a man who educated himself. He was a man who educated his children. This portrait of Roselba Peel is from our collection at the DIA, and it's currently on view. So if you go to see this portrait of James, right next to it, you'll see the tiny miniature portrait of Roselba. It's a delicate work. It's a watercolor on ivory, and it was painted in 1820. Miniature portraits were the rage in America at this time. Anna Claypool Peel painted over 150 of these small little paintings because, they're portable. You can carry them around. She also included in her repertoire of sitters were two famous American presidents, James Monroe and Andrew Jackson. Now let's go back to this picture of James. We see he's wearing a medal on his lapel, as I mentioned earlier. It's a medal from the Society of Cincinnati, named for a Roman war hero who preferred private retirement to public glory. So after the war was over, he returned back to his home after the war. After the Revolutionary War, George Washington was elected as the first President General of the Society of Cincinnati. James Peel, who went to war to serve his country that he loved, was a member of the society as well. Now, here's an image of the Medal of Cincinnati on the right. You can take a look at it. That's what he's wearing, and you see the picture of George Washington with the same medal on his lapel. As you can see, the bald eagle is the insignia for the Society of Cincinnati. Since ancient times, the eagle was considered a sign of strength, and the Roman Republic used this bird as their symbol, and in 1782, the bald eagle was adopted as the national symbol of America. The Society of Cincinnati was established 1 year later, 1783, as the American War for Independence came to a close. Today, this society still exists. It's one of the most prestigious societies in the country, and it's a symbol of the love and patriotism that we have for our country. So back to the portrait. Charles Wilson Peel admired, loved, respected his younger brother, and he painted the portrait, the Lamplight Portrait of James, as a loving tribute to him. Today, it's one of the best known portraits in its period. Any questions, Christine?
We have a nice comment that you're providing great stories.
Great,
So,
thanks.
thank you.
We try our best, right, girls?
Absolutely.
Okay, now Kathleen, she's going to show us a painting that is one of the most popular paintings at the DIA.
Yeah. Well, Deb, I love the portrait you just showed us. It is so loving and it's so intimate, and everything about it shows love. And it's very traditional painting. And here we have a very traditional painting. And as you said, Deb, it is absolutely one of our biggest crowd pleasers. And what we see here is we see two young girls, and they're obviously looking at each other with complete trust and love. And look at how they're kind of in a little glade. They're encapsulated by nature. They're safe. They're away from the world. They just look like, simple young girls. They're barefoot. They're probably from the village around here. And they're just safe. And this is what the artist, William Adolphe Bouguereau, wanted to portray. Two young, innocent girls completely protected from the harsh reality of the world. And we see that, the soft greens, the gentle palette. Off on the right side in the far distance, we see kind of like a pond or maybe a lake, but it's calm. There are no clouds in the horizon. There's nothing to come and spoil this special relationship that these two girls have. And as I said, just the soft palette. The one girl, the blonde girl, is wearing a red ribbon in her hair. There's a little bit of piping on the little girl with the dark hair. But other than that, they're just kind of engrossed in each other. Are they sisters? Are they friends? We don't know. Does it matter? They're just together, and they're safe, and they're innocent. Now, let's talk about one more thing, though, before we move on. You notice that the little girl with the dark hair is holding in her hands, she's holding, a handful. And I know a lot of our viewers are going like, yeah, well, it's called the nut gatherers, and those are nuts that they've gathered, obviously, right? Wrong. We just found out relatively recently, thanks to scholarship by our curators, that the title that the museum gave this piece, The Nut Gatherers, for decades is actually wrong. The name of this painting by William Adolphe Bouguereau is actually The Hazelnuts. And that's what the young girl with the dark hair is holding. She's got a handful of hazelnuts. Bouguereau did a different painting called The Nut Gatherers. And so we have updated all of our information. In French, this was Les Noisettes, the hazelnuts, and this is the updated version. And for those of you who love this painting and have come down to see it a lot, we've actually moved its location. We've put it up on the 3rd floor next to a couple other Bouguereaus that we own. And so, Kimmy, if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, the one over on the right is another one of Bouguereau's painting. It's called On the Shore, and this time he tells us it's two sisters. And this one was done, over a decade after the hazelnuts, but we still see the same kind of loving protection there. The way the taller girl, the older sister, she's got her hand around the shoulders of her little sister. She's kind of leaning over protectively. They're outdoors at the seaside, but it's a very calm setting again. The girls are protected against the elements and the water by some kind of a mix of, maybe like a sea break or something, either natural or man-made. There's the water in the background, but again, it's very, very calm. And there's, mountains going up, but again, they're kind of hazy. Everything about it is warm and intimate and loving. Now, if you look at the dates of these, 1882 and 1896, of course, that's when Impressionism was becoming all the rage in France. And if you look at these two pictures, these are pretty traditional pictures. They've got very definite brush strokes. The entire frame is filled in. We can see the features of the girls. And that's because Bouguereau was a very talented and respected teacher at the Académie des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And he taught traditional art. He just didn't have anything to do with the Impressionists at all. But as I've said, we are so lucky we have these two paintings joined with each other right up on the 3rd floor. And I know some of you at home, you've liked the painting. You might have a coffee mug or a t-shirt or a tote bag or a refrigerator magnet or a glasses case or something with this picture on it. But again, it's just, the love and affection of young girls, young people, in their own little world. So, Christine, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Kathleen. No, not at this time, but I second the encouragement to go to the 3rd floor and look at our newly installed trio of Bouguereaus. They look so terrific together, and it's the first time we've ever done that. And I know when Jill Shaw, the curator, was up there one day, she was just beaming about how terrific they look together. So I do encourage everybody, when you come down to the museum, go up to the 3rd floor and take a look at these. We can't even explain to you how beautiful they are by looking at the slides. You have to come and see them. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, Kristen. Well, I was just talking about the love between friends or sisters, and now Tana is going to talk about some more family love. So, Tana, whenever you're ready. Kimmy? Oh, there we go. Great.
Thanks, Kimmy. Yeah, nice job, Kathleen. Before I even get into this poem, Deb, you were talking about Vincent Peale's painting, and we went to an excerpt with an eagle on it, and you mentioned that the eagle had a lot of symbolic value in America and then also in Rome. And it struck me, the eagle also has a lot of symbolic value in Native American culture. And I just find it fascinating that the reverence for the eagle transcends time and boundaries. That's one of the neat things about studying art. You see how even though cultures are separated by time and space, humans gravitate toward kind of the same things over and over again.
And we find that idea again and again and again throughout the museum. If you go from one gallery to another, you see that there's a connection that transcends time.
Yeah, it's super exciting to me. So back to this painting. This painting is Domestic Happiness by Lily Martin Spencer. It was made in 1849, and in my opinion, it's actually a pretty exciting piece. And it's exciting because this artist asks us to look at love in a new way. She was part of an energy, part of a force that challenged marital roles for the time, gender roles for the time, and the roles of women. Because before 1849, the roles of women were pretty restrictive, and they weren't looked at as being able to do much more than raise families. This artist, Lily Martin Spencer, was very popular and widely reproduced in mid-19th century America, especially amongst some middle-class women. She grew up in Cincinnati. Her parents were French-born. Her parents were social radicals. They participated in the feminist and abolitionist movements. And another interesting coincidence is that Harriet Beecher Stowe grew up in Cincinnati. And so people speculate that more than likely the families knew each other. And Lily was influenced by the thinkings and leanings of Harriet Beecher Stowe. She moved to New York in 1848. Sorry, was somebody going to say something? Okay, I'll keep going. She moved to New York in 1848, which is the same year as the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention. And that's also about the same time that Horace Mann started campaigning for free compulsory public education for white children. But it was still exciting public education. And one of the coolest things about Lily is that she was married with children, and she was the one who was the breadwinner in the family. She supported the family. There we go. That's Lily. She supported the family with her painting, and what a family it was. She had 13 children, 7 of whom made it to adulthood. And while she was painting, her husband was the one who was tending to the house and the children. So you see some of her social ideologies in the painting. The object label, you can't see it here in the slide, but the object label in the museum is hush, don't wake them. And when you see it, how many mothers have said those words? Images of sleeping babies with adoring parents now seem familiar, but in 1849 they were unusual, and they were seen as innovative in showing children as pure and without sin. And that's because prior to this, children were viewed as being born with sin. which needed to be cultivated out of them and replaced by self-control as soon as possible. So this scene, the painting, is based on a preliminary drawing of Lily's two oldest sons asleep in each other's arms. Their parents, aglow with pride, are watching them. The children are shown as innocent babies, bathed in white light that's coming from the left and in need of gentle nurturing. And you look at the female figure's hand, it's held up in a hush, don't wake them kind of pose. And the purpose of that is to show female agency over the children's slumber. Early in American history, the father was at the top of the hierarchy in the home, and the father was the unopposed authority. His role was to instill obedience and submissiveness. Spencer's view was quite different. In this painting, the mother has control of the family situation, and that was somewhat problematic in terms of social structure because it depended on a woman's ability to have domestic help. Compositionally, we've got the figures close to the foreground with a curtain behind them. The colors and the tonality are soft overall. The only well-known female genre painter of her generation, Lily Spencer, specialized in themes of domesticity. Domestic Happiness is one of her most important works. And that's all that I have right now. Christine, are there any questions?
We do not have questions, Tana, but thank you. That was terrific.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tana. You know what? That might be a little controversial. I wonder how controversial that was at the time, that particular, you know?
I love it.
Here is another piece that might be considered controversial. Probably it was when I first entered our museum, and it's by Ed Fraga. He's a Detroit-based artist. He was born in 1956, received his Bachelor of Fine Arts from Wayne State University in 1980, and in 2008, the university recognized him with a Distinguished Alumnus Award. This work is an oil on oak, and it's titled La Santa Igloriosa Carne. It was created in 1993, and the artist himself describes his painting as a loving memorial to past lives. The AIDS crisis was a period in the United States where the virus was first discovered in the gay community. Because it spread with a vengeance, AIDS was labeled a gay disease, even though it had been in existence since 1969 in other populations in the United States. But, due to the rampant homophobia that permeated throughout our society, the disease went unacknowledged by our government for many years. In the early 1990s, the DIA invited Ed Fraga to participate in an exhibition that paired the work of local artists with works of classic artists from the museum's permanent collection. He selected the Renaissance galleries as a reference for his piece. As you might know, Renaissance means rebirth, and Fraga used the concept of rebirth in order to honor those whose lives had ended because of AIDS. Fraga is known for incorporating religious symbolism into his paintings and drawings. La Santa Igloriosa Carne, translated, means holy and glorious flesh. This is a line from Dante's Inferno that says that we will be more perfect when our glorious bodies and souls are once again united. So now let's take a look at this painting. The image of an unmade bed alludes to profound human experiences like conception, birth, sleep, sex, sickness, and death that often take place on a bed. Look at the sheets of this bed. They're very rumpled and they're kind of pulled back, suggesting that something, took place on this bed in a moment in time. There's an altar-like quality that's created by the golden hue that surrounds the bed. And at the bottom of the bed of this painting is a row of calla lilies, 9 calla lilies. They're lined up as if on an altar, and they suggest the lit altar candles that are used in services for daily prayer, for weddings or for funerals. Now, somebody asked me earlier, why are there 9? Now, the artist himself said, that's open to interpretation, but I can tell you that they can represent the liturgy of the hours that is said by Christians, the priests. Every day they have to say the liturgy of the hours, specific times during the day, and it could also represent 9 months of pregnancy. It's open to interpretation. Now, Kimmy, could you show us the next slide? This is an insert. You saw it's a painting and a painting. And this particular insert is also open to interpretation. Is this heaven or something in between? Is it hell? Is the imagery with its scattered ruins, is it scary? Is it threatening? And on the right, could that be the angel of death? Or is this an image that invites us with its warm yellow light? And is that angel welcoming us to a peaceful place? Again, the artist says it's up to our interpretation. But Ed Fraga does continue to exhibit his paintings and drawings throughout the country, and his work can be found in many museums and in many private collections. Our painting, this painting, La Santa Igloriosa Carne, is a loving homage to all those dear friends who died from AIDS. And this piece can be found in the contemporary galleries on the second floor. It joined our collection in 1996, and it's rarely been off view because it's very, very popular with the public and with other local artists and writers. Christine, any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Now, Kathleen, she's going to end our presentation with a very interesting work of art.
Thanks, Deb. I love that piece by Ed. It has such obviously lasting and universal applications, and it is interesting what people see and make of that. So yes, this is our last piece today. And while we look at this piece, I want everybody to keep in mind just how big this piece is. It's currently not on display, but if it was, this thing is like 11 feet by 12 feet. This is a massive piece of art. And when we look at it, well, let's see, what do we have here? We've got that kind of beautiful little blue violet colored sky. And over on the right, we have this magnificent tree. It looks like it's maybe in full blossom in the spring. Maybe it's a fruit tree or something. And we've got the green grass down below it. And if you look really closely, you can see there's kind of a picket fence. So we're obviously in some kind of a garden or something like that. But then look over at the left side of the screen. And what do we have here? We have these two giant men, okay? They're not the same person. They're definitely two different people. I mean, the gentleman in front's got glasses. The gentleman behind him has got different hair and everything. But other than that, they're pretty identical. They're wearing the exact same outfit, the exact same colors. They're wearing like an old-fashioned tweed suit with the 3 buttons. They have their, bright pop of colors in their socks and their ties. There's a little bit nod to nature. I mean, they are wearing the green shirts and they're sitting on the green chairs. But I mean, look at their postures. They're just perched. They're just sitting there like royalty or something. And they've got their hands on their thighs, resting like, good little English schoolboys or something. And when we see, there are 2 gentlemen here, Gilbert and George. And George is the one in front. Gilbert's behind him. So it makes sense that we can only see, we see both of George's arms and hands, and we see one of Gilbert's. But if you look down below, what's happened to Gilbert's other leg? We kind of see the 2 stools or the chairs kind of melding into one. We only see 3 legs. So what is going on here in this huge, huge piece? Well, before we can go too much into this piece, we have to know a little bit about the artists. So Kimmy, do we have a photograph of the gentleman? Yeah. So this is a photograph that was taken in 1987, the same time they created that beautiful, huge piece called Parked. And Gilbert and George are 2 gentlemen who met in art school in London in 1967. And they became a couple almost exclusively, both personally and in the artistic world. They dropped both of their last names and they created a new entity called Gilbert and George. And they like to work with these huge pieces that they put together. They start with an anchoring piece, such as a photograph of themselves here. And when they make photographs, Gilbert always photographs George, and George always photographs Gilbert. They don't go to other photographers. And they always dress alike, and they're always seen together. They never go out in public unless they're together. And the way they dress, like proper English gentlemen. Remember, they met in 1967 in a London art school. You can imagine it was a swinging 60s. I'll bet everybody else had hair and mustaches, and the women, of course, we all had our hair parted and long, dressed like hippies and bohemian styles and all sorts of flamboyant clothes. So they went back to something that harkened something literally from another century, from the 19th century. And they have maintained this style throughout their lives. And so when they do their art, they begin with these basic photographs. And the piece that we saw, they had a photograph of Kew Gardens, which is a big garden in London. And then they superimposed shots of themselves on top of it. And then they paint and they color. And Kimmy, if we can go back to an image of the piece of art called Park, please. When you look at it, you see all the lines going both horizontally and vertically. So what do these lines represent? I mean, are we on the other side of a fence looking at them? Are they looking at us through a window? Well, the purpose of the lines is, of course, to create a dynamic image, but it's also when they blow up their original piece into this 11 by 12 feet piece, these are the lines that help them keep everything in perspective and bring us this marvelous piece. So the title of this is Parked, and these two gentlemen are definitely parked. And in this piece, they're kind of making fun of the English aesthetes who used to say that, oh, proper British people in society would go out to nature and they would find love and they would love it there. And just they would feel at one with the universe. And it was, so inspiring to them. And here we have Gilbert and George just kind of perched, looking at nature. And frankly, they're not impressed. So Gilbert and George have been together. They celebrated their 50th anniversary as an artistic couple in 2017. And in real life, they got married in 2008. And when they first met, they lived in a working class neighborhood of London. Now, because of the success of their artistic career, they live in a refurbished 17th century home just outside of London. And so this is our last piece of today, and it's another sign of long-lasting devotion, both in real life and to their artistic careers. So, Christine, do we have any questions about this piece?
We do not have any viewer questions, Kathleen, but thank you for sharing that. I certainly learned a lot about Gilbert and George today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, if no more questions, that concludes our presentation. And as you may remember, we told you to pay careful attention because we've got a trivia question for you. So be sure the first people who respond will win that that fabulous little table sculpture of love by Robert Indiana. So here's our question. Everybody ready? Okay. Who were the two lovers who Tana introduced us to, who were immortalized in the poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow? So I should have music to play, like Final Jeopardy or something while we're doing this. So do we have any? Okay. Amanda, Christine, do we have any questions? Any answers?
No answers yet, but maybe we can talk about what's happening next week on the program.
Sure. Next week, we're going to be going a little bit different direction. We're going to have you playing Art Bingo, and that will be with Ian and Kimmy. So on July 22nd, make sure you come back and join us then. Let me give that question one more time. Cut in or cut out. So who were the two lovers that Tana introduced us to that were immortalized in the very popular poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow?
Somebody got it.
Oh, we got a winner?
Yay.
Good.
Good job.
Well done. Well done. Okay, so that concludes our show for today. Deb, thank you so much. Tana, thank you so much. I think we had a lot of fun. And hopefully next week on July 22nd, everybody will come back and play a little bingo. Kimmy, thank you so much for your help with the slides. Christine, thank you so much for your help with the questions. And Amanda, thanks so much for putting everything together. So from all of us, bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you soon.